Love, living, love anew. Return after 13 years. Testimony of Ania and Andrzej. Ania and Andrzej reunited after 13 years of living in non-sacramental relationships in which they had children. Ania 3, Andrzej 1. They are a living proof how the grace of sacrament works, that it is never too late to reunite and there are no irreversible situations. In May 2015, their first child was born. They welcomed Maksymilian. Maybe I say something about our story. So it happened that after 3 years of marriage, I decided that it wasn't Andrzej who was the love of my life, but another man whom I met at work.
Ania.
Andrzej.
Tak.
Yes, I'm due in May. Yes, this is our happiness, also a surprise. Well, we can't say we expected it and we planned it, so it was a grace. Love, living, love anew. Love, living, love anew. At the beginning, we have managed to be together in marriage. We can't even call it a crisis, but it was my fault. It's also a difficult topic for me, but it just seemed to me that my husband wasn't my love, that I found a better version, right? A better love. I didn't think about it then. I just followed, let's say, as they put it nicely, followed my heart. I was devastated. At that time, it seemed to be the most difficult time of my life. And so in general, it probably was. Those were such difficult moments. It was difficult to go through, to understand it, because in general, we as a husband and wife, as a couple, were perceived as a very happy couple, and such a perfect couple. And suddenly such a shock. What's more, it was just days before our third anniversary. Yes, and very quickly it turned out that I was pregnant. So, let's say, it seemed to me then that there was no way back. And my husband quite quickly also found comfort for himself. Well, yes, in reality, I actually quite long couldn't come in terms with the thought, because it wasn't that right away, next month. There were some attempts, yes, to start my life again somehow, but still my life was in my head. Finally, after about 6 months, I was in a new relationship. But it was still just some kind of comfort. And this is the harm I did to the other person, so it is some kind of stigma which I carry, because I can see it now that it wasn't sincere or true. So in connection with that, these are the consequences that we can't see until after it all, and we have to face them later. We are not aware of it. And it wasn't a sudden event, it didn't happen in hours, rather it was a process. First of all, I started to wonder why I wasn't happy in that relationship, because in men's way everything seemed to be going well, but I was all the time somehow emotionally upset. And I also thought why my partner wasn't happy with me either. It was some kind of pretended life. After our split, he even told me that we had pretended in a way. I pretended to be his wife, he pretended to be my husband, but we just, well, I don't know, we just had those kids and tried to put it all together, but there was no deeper sense in it. Yes, and finally I decided to end it all. I was certainly somehow influenced by the fact that I wanted to return to church. I started to pray and I received, let's say, I now see it from this perspective, I received such grace, a grace of starting my life again from the beginning. But at least leaving that relationship and abandoning sin, and, well, it seemed to me that I had something good still waiting for me in my life. On the other hand, it was some kind of rubble, ruins, but at that time, I didn't think about coming back to my husband at all, but I seemed to Somehow I probably wanted to offer it to God and that it would all go as it should. But the other one is working as well. And it's difficult, it's hard sometimes for men to tell way in your heart which of this work is from the good and which from the bad. I no longer thought about her as my wife, but still some kind of my interest in her life has always been inside of me. Yes, what is she doing right now? What's happening? How is she? So when I heard about the baby, then second wedding, then I thought to myself, well, let her work on her new life. I also worked on my life in some ways. I've been trying, all of my relationships seemed similar to what Ania had. So generally, on the surface, it seemed that everything was okay, but in fact, it wasn't okay. We both somehow also we missed something. I was missing something in my relationship, and I think this is also the reason why we are together now. Because it wasn't that bad in the very beginning. I don't know what Ania thinks about it. A key to such marital success, or in general building a relation, a bond, is closeness to God and closeness of that bond. When you are close to the source, then you can love those people in a different way. Otherwise, I think man by himself wants to live and create bonds, is not able to, cannot do it. Now I think that by himself simply all that is very fragile, then, and you don't live in truth. As at that time, I was at the 12 Steps workshop, and one of the elements is atonement and conversation, talking to people one has hurt, and I knew at the time, let's say, for weeks, I have been getting ready that I would have to meet with my husband and talk to him one more time about this situation. I thought it would happen in a slightly different way, that we would have a date. But it turned out that we met by accident, and it was then that this conversation took place. It wasn't a long meeting. The next one was a month later, and this one was arranged in advance. It was then that we met. Ania asked me to meet her. We met in a restaurant, and that one was longer. We talked longer then. She told me partially about her feelings and asked me a lot about my life. So, after this meeting, I received this beautiful letter in which she described in further detail her faith and her feelings. And it was so... I liked it very much. It was such... At that time, I didn't think yet that we could come back together, because it was... These thoughts haven't come to my mind yet, but that meeting and that letter, certainly a kind of a seed that was inside me. Those meetings and those letters caused that the seed started to germinate. Well, I think that everything that was there was inspiring, because, including the fact that she believes that I'm her other half and that we together are complementing one another. Those are the things that stuck with me most. When we talk to each other, it's like these 13 years weren't there at all, as if we parted just yesterday and met again today, and it is so, well, life goes on, and like those 13 years weren't true. Are you building your relationship from the beginning now? Do you live together? Yes, well, it's not easy, but we were aware of the fact that also my children live with us, and Andrzej's son comes to visit, and Andrzej visits him as well. So it's a completely different situation than when we were young and with no strings attached.
C'est la vie.
C'est la vie, as the French say. But I think that, yes, we have a good life ahead of us, but we are still facing many difficulties. I have recently finished that relationship in which I have been for the past 12 years. That is linked with numerous issues. The woman I have been with, whom I left, feels hurt. Neither my family does understand what I have done. It is difficult to understand. In men's way, it's difficult to understand and believe that I've decided to be with Ania again, but when you take God into it and all those feelings, then it's much easier to understand. Yes, certainly it is so. Our example, for sure, and I think this grace that accompanies the sacrament, it helped us very much. Because if it wasn't for the sacrament, and if it wasn't, for example, for what I found at the website of SYCHAR about marriage, about what God thinks about it all, then I certainly wouldn't think about coming back to such previous relationship. But since the end is positive, we also wish to show to others that such things are possible. We've received such grace. It really is a grace. Just a mother's presence here. I admire those persons here who have been separate for years and pray for reunion. Well, in a way, I didn't really make any effort in it all, but I received this gift, grace from God. But I think that I now also must give back some of it, that the bread I have received I must share with others. God has a salvation plan for each one of us, and that moment has to come. In a relationship, in a marriage, it's so that this moment has to come for one and for the other person too. We also had some 8 years ago an attempt of return, but it didn't work at the time. I was absolutely unready. If it was a year ago, then, for example, I know that my husband was completely unprepared. So this moment has to come at a certain point, and you need to be vigilant and wait. My son is 2, so he doesn't understand much of it yet. But I, for example, can see in this whole situation such positive elements in him. He has made a big progress in his development for the last 2 months that we've been together. He likes to visit us. He likes to play with Ania's children. I can see he feels good at this home, because it's so cheerful here. While so far he has been raised, he's the only child for that reason, in a peaceful environment, in such an empty house. Yet children like company, so for him it's also a developmental stimulus. The fact that he can play with those other children, Ania's children, I think also accept it very well, right? Love, living, love anew. Every difficult sacramental marriage can be saved. Each sacramental marriage, even after the divorce, and when a spouse is in a second relationship, has a chance to be reborn, as each sacramental spouse has a chance to open up to the grace of repentance and the fulfillment of marital vows. Charism of the SYCHAR community of difficult marriages.